Please subscribe to this channel, so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 741. First Stage. Dugu Xiao Yi. Despite having 3 saints as his bodyguards, Li Yuran still felt oddly unsafe. It was really illogical. In a place like Tianxiang, having a peak Earth Xian as a bodyguard was enough to let anyone do whatever they wanted to without fear. To have a Sky Xian bodyguard would be a dream come true. But the situation now was different. He had 3 powerful people who were 1,000,000 times more powerful than a Sky Xian beside him. There really shouldn't be anything that could threaten him in this world. But Li Yuran oddly didn't feel a single ounce of the sense of security he should have held. Upon arrival at the doorstep of the Jun residence, Li Yuran was taken aback. The doors of the Jun residence were wide open with only 2 relaxed guards watching the entrance, none of that tight security in the past. They didn't even seem bothered by their arrival. Li Yuran handed over the visiting card. The guard took it and ran off to pass the message, returning shortly to invite them in. Old Master invites young Master Li in. He only invited them in and didn't even send someone to bring them in. He didn't even send a housekeeper out. Li Yuran was surprised. It seemed like the Jun family was not too friendly towards him. Li Yuran thought that the Jun family was trying to trick the enemy into thinking otherwise with their sudden lax in security. By pretending to be weak, it would trick clever enemies into noticing the dangers that awaited. But in reality, they were truly powerless and weak, creating an illusionary pretense of being weak to conceal their actual weakness in reality. An extreme move of putting yourself in a powerless position that was ready to be obliterated to make the enemy suspicious and suspect that you already set up a trap and feared nothing. This was a strategy to counter smart enemies. It was the best strategy to employ in order to confuse the enemy when you were really powerless and weak. The stratagem of the empty city. You are really lacking in defense, and a stronger enemy decides to arrive at this timing. If you put up a strong front, it'll instead trigger the enemy's desire to battle. And destruction may occur when the 2 forces clashes. However, if you put up a weak front like this, it'll cause the enemy to become wary and suspicious, unable to decide on what course of action to take. When Li Yuran arrived, he could guess that the sudden relaxation in the defenses of the Jun residence was part of Jun Zhan Tian's intentional stratagem. He did not comment on it openly, but secretly felt pleased with himself. Jun Zhan Tian, you may have spent all your life fighting battles, and you are clearly well versed and skilled with your strategies. But I'm no herbivore. Didn't I see through your strategy easily? Looks like your silly illusory tricks have no effect in face of our capable forces. But Jun Zhan Tian did not send anyone out to usher them in, revealing a stronger animosity. It clearly told them, "We do not welcome you." This made Li Yuran a little doubtful. Could it be, they were really unafraid? We are definitely powerful. But what about them? Do they perhaps have stronger forces? Just at this moment, the 3 saints behind him lifted their heads and took a sniff in the air. All their expressions changed at the same time. To think that there is spiritual qi of such a pure form. It's a surprise to have a place like this in the world. The spiritual qi here at the Jun residence is so rich. Even 3 holy lands, which boast the most spiritual qi, cannot be compared to this. One of them whispered. The other 2 nodded slightly, and their faces darkened more. A situation like this was likely due to some unrivaled master cultivating his Xian skills in the Jun family residence. Every day, he would absorb all of the heaven-earth spiritual qi in the surroundings, so all the spiritual qi from other places would start to gather here instead. Over a period of time, a Xian qi field would have developed. Even if that person no longer intentionally trained, the spiritual qi could still gather around here. Over a long and continuous period, a thick and pure spiritual qi field developed, and it would always hover around and encompass around the Jun residence. The three saints were all experts in this field. How could they not be aware of something like this? If there was an unrivaled master awaiting in the Jun residence, such a phenomenon would not be a surprise. But the thing that really scared them was the purity of the spiritual qi in the air. It was so thick it didn't dissipate. This was an unimaginable situation because as long as someone stopped their training, even if a spiritual qi field vortex existed and lingered around, it should not reach such a level of purity and richness. Had it been the case where that person was training when they had arrived, it would have made sense. But there were no fluctuations from someone practicing, so everything happening right now made no sense. When these three people stepped into the qi field, they instantly felt extremely refreshed. Even at the Supreme Golden City, at the place all the saints trained together, there was no such accumulation of spiritual qi of this scale or richness. And this place was in the mortal realm. In other words, the rate this unrivaled master released spiritual qi was beyond the rate of all the saints in Supreme Golden City taking in spiritual qi combined. And by multiple folds. A fact like this shook them to their very core. Even though they had yet to meet this master, they all felt a little timid already. To think that there was someone like this in the mortal realm. We clearly are not his match in a one-on-one battle. Even if the three of us joined forces, we still may not stand a chance. This person is too fearsome. All four of them pretended that they were unaffected by anything despite hesitating in their hearts as they stepped foot into the Jun residence. They were heading to the main hall when all three saints stopped at the same time. From inside of the house, the crisp voice of a young girl could be heard. "Snowy, don't run about. If you run off again, I'll really hit you. You lazy fellow. To think you already put on so much weight. I can't even carry you anymore. So infuriating. If you continue to grow fat like this, I'm going to abandon you. I don't want you anymore. Don't run. I'm so tired. You're so fat. But why are you so good at running? Stop." Following that clear shout, a white animal ran over with a whoosh. It was the size of a lion cub, and its chubby body was covered in snowy white long fur. Its eyes as pretty as rubies, and it was extremely adorable. It rolled playfully on the ground before running off again. Following it, a young girl came chasing from the inner house, panting heavily. "Snowy, if you keep running I will Li Yu ran? Why did Snowy become Li Yu ran? Could it be the legend of turning into human after it grows up? Snowy has such an ability." It was a beautiful young girl. And although there was still some baby fat on her face, it wasn't hard to tell that she would definitely become an alluring great beauty in a few years' time. Her eyes were as clear as water, like the untainted spring waters of the mountains. She had fair skin like a porcelain doll, a sharp nose, a small cherry mouth, and dark and silky hair that was carelessly tied up, adding on to the energy and cheekiness of a young teenage girl. Although she was wearing thick clothes in this harsh winter, her emerald clothing fitted perfectly on her body, not making her look plump or reducing her body. Like a blooming gardenia in the morning after a spring rain, only one look was enough to make someone feel extremely refreshed and sincerely adore her. What an adorable little girl. To think that it's Miss Dugu. It's been a while since we last met. Li Yuran smiled and bowed slightly. You've become even more beautiful in these days that we haven't met. Hey! Li Yuran. Who would want to meet you? You hypocrite. Can you wipe that hypocritical smile off your face? Do you know, The more I look at it, the more disgusted I get. Look at you. Smiling like a woman. Not even showing your teeth one. Where is your manliness? Let's not even use our emotion to compare. Any other man out there is more virile than you. Ayaya. Li Yuran. You've always behaved like neither a male nor female. Do you know my teeth hurts just looking at you? This girl was Dugu Xiao. And with a chain of insults like this, Li Yuran didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Even the three saints were taken aback. All three saints couldn't help but raise a brow. They weren't expecting this. What a beautiful, cute, bubbly, and adorable lady. But why is she so aggressive when she opens her mouth to speak? She is completely unafraid. Is the world so wild nowadays? Back in our days, the ladies were so shy and reserved. To think that now it's the other way around. How can Miss Dugu say such things? We are old friends, after all. Degrading me like this. How should I feel about it? Li Yuran touched his nose awkwardly. But he did it in such a natural manner that no one could tell he was at a loss. Hui. Li Yuran. Ayayaya. You really want to disgust me to death. Who is old friends with you? Who am I? Are you worthy? I have no time to waste with you. I need to go chase Snowy. 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 Don't run. Li Yuran. Why did you change to these three followers? Dugu Xiao was about to walk away calling out to Snowy. But she looked at the three saints standing behind Li Yuran, looking at them as if she had discovered something new. With a face full of contempt, she pouted her lips and squinted. Look at the three people you picked. TSK. Why are they so ugly? They all look hideous and stupid. You may be lesser than me by a few folds, but you are still the young master of a worldly family. You should pick a few servants that look decent enough to be brought out. I really judge your taste. Someone like the three of them. In our Jun family, no matter how capable, just on their appearance alone, they would be naturally meant to clean the toilets. After thoroughly insulting them, Dugu Xiao left to chase after Snowy. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 742. It's really the 9 Nether 14th young master. Toilet cleaners? Li Yuran was feeling so awkward that he stood there with sweat forming on the tip of his nose. He wouldn't mind her teasing him, but she even made fun of the three saints. And the saints didn't even have a proper place to vent out their anger. And they were teased because of me. He was feeling helpless. Just as he was still feeling uncertain, he was surprised to see one of the saints smile. The saint shook his head and sighed. What a naughty and weird girl, but she's definitely adorable. The other two saints also broke into smiles that were hardly seen. Their smile even showed a hint of nostalgia, and they didn't seem to mind her rudeness at all. Li Yuran finally let out a sigh of relief. Saints are really different. They are so much more tolerating. But how would he know that the saints were actually shocked to the extent that they'd almost lost their words? It was the second time they were caught by surprise since they entered the Jun family. It was not Dugu Xiao, but Snowy that surprised them. The little naughty one that zoomed past before them. Although Snowy was fast, how could it evade their scrutiny? They could evaluate its true strength even if it was much faster, but the results astonished them. Snowy was a level 8 Xian beast, and more specifically a top rank. A level 8 Xian beast would not have caught their attention despite its rarity in the secular world. After all, with their capabilities, any one of them could kill it with just a finger. The key to their amazement was the fact that Snowy was supposed to be a level 7 iron-winged panther. And the upper limit of an iron-winged panther was the top rank of level 7. But the snowy before their eyes was an authentic level 8. And even a very young one that hadn't even reached a year old. They could also tell that the peculiarity was caused by a Xian cultivator who used a supernatural power to help push the little beast's bodily limits. Almost everything except the skin and fur were replaced, resulting in such a miracle. Although it looked like an iron-winged panther, it basically held the potential of being a level 9 Xian beast or even higher. If they allowed Snowy to continue growing and keep improving, perhaps in a few hundred years, the Tian Fa forest would have another Saint King. Saint King. A level that even they couldn't even imagine. But that would only be hundreds of years later. Although Snowy had the potential, it was still very weak now. What was more concerning was the person who helped Snowy. What kind of unbelievable power must he possess to instigate such change? At least the three of them definitely would not be capable of doing so. Not even with the power of all the saints of the three holy lands had combined. It was beyond the capability of an ordinary human being. They even made a deduction from this, which led them to pure pessimism. Who in the Xian continent would be so bored to extend a puny level 7 Xian beast's potential? He would either be too bored or mad. Or perhaps both. There was only one person that was so unpredictable but had so much power. The three saints looked at each other and reached a consensus. It had to be the 9 Nether 14th young master. Perhaps among those living today, only the 9 Nether 14th young master would be crazy enough to do such a ridiculous thing. Moreover, iron-winged panthers were exclusive to Tian Fa forest. And the 9 Nether 14th young master was sealed there. Everything seemed to make sense. Only a madman like him would do such weird and absurd thing out of boredom. Who else would waste his own effort in helping a little level 7 Xian beast extend its potential? Giving it the opportunity of becoming a future beast king? Clearly, the three of them had no ways of dealing with a madman like this, let alone his superior power. By now, the three of them were 60% certain that the person behind the Jun family was the 9 Nether 14th young master. However, knowing their situation did not help alleviate their anxiety. In fact, it only intensified their stress. Before they had reached Tianxiang, the three of them had a discussion over who exactly it would be. Would it be the legendary 9 Nether 14th young master or someone else? Undoubtedly, all of them have the same idea. Don't let it be that madman. If it really is him, Tianxiang City is really in for some deep mess. If a direct conflict were really to develop, Tianxiang City would not be spared. Not even half of the 9 saints sent on this mission would return alive. There was even the possibility that they would be completely wiped out. So when they saw Snowy, they felt as if a mountainous burden had just landed onto their shoulders. They felt helplessness and dismay. Dang! It's really him. It was understandable why they didn't even pay any attention to the insult of mistaking them for toilet cleaners. Snowy was assisted by that madman, so perhaps its owner was also under his protection. They decided to cause as little trouble as possible at this point of time, so they just went with it. The three saints were very experienced with their old age. They could quickly put on a smile perfect for the situation and deceive everyone around. However, they weren't aware of the existence of the Hongjun Pagoda. It was something more than 10 times more powerful than the 9 Nether 14th young master. They had unreasonably overestimated the power of the 9 Nether 14th young master. It was the classic situation of scaring themselves unnecessarily. This arrangement was formulated by Old Master Jun when Jun Moxie left. It was specifically aimed at tackling the psychology of a Grand Master. For now, The strategy seemed to be working very well. Afterwards, the four of them entered the hall of the Jun family in silence. The butler Old Pang was waiting in the hall. He welcomed the four in politely. He then gracefully poured all of them tea and served them diligently. With the stature the three saints presented right now, they were not supposed to have been given seats, but seats were arranged for them anyway. This only heightened the three saints' anxiety. And there were no signs of Jun Tian at all. Butler Pang, may I know if the old General Jun is at home? One of my aims of visiting this time is to meet the old general, Li Yuran said nonchalantly with a graceful smile. He was sitting straight with a cup of tea in hand. He blew at the tea leaves as he uttered out these words. Young Master Li, our old master has already resigned from the position of a general and is retired at home. How could he bear that title anymore? Old Pang smiled modestly. He was standing upright, except for a slightly bent waist. One of his hands was behind his back while the other held the teapot. He slowly poured tea into the cups of the three saints with a neat noble posture. His attire today was quite formal. Even his hair was waxed with egg white until it shined. Even his smile was so elegant that it was comparable with Li Yuran. If it weren't for the menace-looking scar on his face. The whole posture originated from Jun Moxie. These was in fact the posture of waiters and waitresses from Western restaurants in Jun Moxie's past life. He taught them to the maidservants. And Old Pang acquired the skill by watching all the time. Upon hearing that Li Yuran was visiting today, Jun Tian requested to serve them with utmost grace and formality. So Old Pang decided to serve by himself. He even sacrificed 12 eggs for the hairstyle. If the whole tea presentation was done by a maidservant, it would indeed amplify her beauty and at the same time increase the gracefulness of her movements. But with someone who was usually so crude like Old Pang, it was like an insult to the person who invented this set of movements. It was especially so given as Old Pang held his chest high and tried to pretend as gentlemanly as he could. He even unintentionally made his face look spookier than before. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 743. Jun Tian's Countermeasure. Looks like old Master Jun is now free from his official responsibilities. That's a great thing. I greatly admire his ability to be able to see past worldly matters and retire swiftly. The true quality of a hero. Li Yuran smiled and gently put the teacup back. Leaning back in his seat, he smiled and asked, just as I have mentioned earlier, I came forth today with intentions to visit old Master Jun. I wonder if it is possible for housekeeper Pang to help inform so. One couldn't help but be impressed with Li Yuran's self-preservation, to be able to continue to smile so elegantly when facing such a grotesque face. As expected, the pertinence of an expert was unfathomable. The scar on Old Pang's face turned red, but he still maintained that gentle and attentive attitude, and smiling, he replied, if that is the case, please wait a while, young Master Li. Then he began to catwalk away, swaying his B*TT as he left. This was part of what Jun Moxie had trained the maids to do, and since Old Pang had learnt it, naturally he had to deliver the full set. The moment Old Pang had stepped foot out, one of the saints couldn't bear it anymore and crushed the teacup in his hand into powder. Wearing an odd expression as if he wanted to vomit or was constipated for almost half a month, he asked despondently, Li Yuran, is that guy a man or a woman? While I could still forcefully endure how sissy he was earlier, but swaying his B*TT like that really makes me. He shook his head and let out a long sigh. As expected, You're bound to meet a demon in area where demons appear. The other two saints nodded aggressively in agreement, clearly feeling the same way. They had better self-preservation and didn't shatter the teacup. Li Yuran was also a little disgusted, but he managed to force himself to bear with it. He frowned slightly and said, "That is old Master Jun's housekeeper. But he used to follow old Master Jun into battle as his first general. If not because he wished to continue to stay by old Master Jun, he would hold a relatively high position in court today. But I don't know why he is behaving so oddly today." Ha! He was the first general. The three saints were surprised. When the Tianxiang Empire charged into battle, were they fighting like women? Li Yuran let out a pft, almost spitting his tea out. Heavy footsteps could be heard from the back, slow and steady. Just from the sound of the footsteps, one could tell how proud and reserved the owner was. Li Yuran and the rest sat properly and reverted back to a serious expression. Jun Tian was the only person who knew everything about the situation in the Jun residence. They only had to observe Jun Tian's expressions carefully. They could definitely tell a lot of facts from that. Even if certain important matters didn't require them to see it for themselves, they could observe the people related to it to gain insight into the situation. Jun Tian's appearance would be the turning point of this trip. The previous rounds of encounters were too much. The four never felt so awkward before in their entire lives. Finally, old Master Jun entered the hall with heavy and powerful strides. His wise eyes glanced calmly at Li Yuran. He let out a simple "oh" before sitting down slowly. Looking at Li Yuran, he spoke. "So it was you. Huh. How is your grandfather? I heard you left Tianxiang recently to learn from a master. I didn't expect you to have returned so soon. I believe you've learnt and gained quite a lot. Your grandfather Li Shang is happy that you've returned so quickly. Isn't he?" Li Yuran lowered his head and bowed slightly. "Thank you, old Master Jun, for thinking of me. I had only learnt that it was tough in the outside world compared to the comforts of home. I couldn't bear to be away from home, so I have returned. As I had returned so soon, I didn't manage to gain anything but only wasted my time. I've let you see me make a joke of myself." Jun Tian laughed. "It's all right if you didn't gain anything. You are still young and have plenty of time to train and practice. You're a good child for knowing how to miss home. One who is worthy of being taught, haha." He had just finished this sentence when his ears seemed to have moved slightly. While there was no change in his smiling expression, his gaze shifted over to the three saints. Wearing a strange look in his gaze, he smiled and asked, "Who are these three people?" Li Yuran quickly replied, "These three people are my followers. Huh. I have been pampered since young. If I don't bring a few followers along when I go out, I will feel really odd." Housekeeper Pang was really generous to serve them tea and grant them seats. But it was really me being impolite. Haha. The three saints quickly stood behind Li Yuran. They were completely disguised like ordinary people. And no matter how one looked at them, they just looked like any other regular person on the streets. The look in Jun Tian's eyes suddenly changed to one of rumination. And he spoke slowly. "Young Master Yuran is truly fortunate to have those three as your followers." Although his expression did not change earlier, his eyes did perk for a moment. But how could such a slight, secretive gesture go unnoticed by the sharp senses of these three saints? The three immediately thought of it. An expert secretly delivered a message to Jun Tian. He definitely told him about our identity and capabilities. So Jun Tian will suddenly pay attention to us. The three immediately activated their spiritual sense to search. Since there was voice transmission, then it definitely needed Xian's strength. And as long as Xian Qi was activated, the spiritual Qi in the surroundings would react along with it. This was an inevitable matter. But after carefully searching around, to their surprise, they realized that there were no spiritual fluctuations in the surrounding, and no abnormalities in the spiritual Qi. Though the three did not allow anything to show on their faces, they heightened their guards. There is always some sort of spiritual Qi fluctuation when one uses voice transmissions, but we did not notice anything like this. This shows how skillful this person is, to be able to conceal all abnormalities in an instant, and for the surroundings to remain this flawless. Just this alone is enough to show how much more skillful he is than us. But why does he not come out directly to defeat us and hide behind the scenes instead? If there was some sort of movement in the air, these three people wouldn't be this suspicious. But precisely because there was nothing that had led these three saints to think that the other party's capabilities were unfathomable and surpassed all of them. But they did not think that it was not because they couldn't find it, but rather that there really was nothing. The only expert present was the old Master Jun sitting before them, who had recently reached the second level of the Spirit Xian realm. He was the number one expert of the Jun family currently. Old Master Jun laughed, his eyes perking a little. His eyes twinkled a little as he stood up. Since you have arrived in the Jun family residence, then you are my guests. I am no longer a marshal or duke, so you don't have to stand on ceremony. Do take a seat. Then he turned to old Pang, who was waiting aside, and said, "We have honored guests. How could you let them stand and talk? What kind of housekeeper are you? Go. I don't need you to wait on us here." Old Pang did not try to speak for himself but quickly admitted to his wrong. Then, swinging his glistening all-back hairstyle and standing upright, he sashayed his way out. Though old Master Jun had no change in his peaceful and calm expression, his heart was frightened by the old Pang's sachet. If he were not aware that the current situation was a matter of life and death, he would have stared dumbfoundedly. But all old Master Jun currently needed to do was just stay calm. In order to bypass this stage, he needed to be absolutely calm and wise. A crisis where there was danger of perishment at any turn. Old Master Jun was very clear. The moment he saw Li Yuran and the three saints, he understood instantly. Of all sorts of things you shouldn't have done, you, Li Yuran, shouldn't have brought these three people along. They do look just like ordinary people with not even of the tiniest bit of Xian Qi cultivation, this is no mistake. But how could people completely without any sort of cultivation be worthy of being the bodyguards of young Master Li? Who are you trying to kid? This loophole is too obvious. With your extremely cautious character, simply bringing three regular people as bodyguards, would you really dare step out of the house? Especially to come all the way to the Jun residence. There was definitely something fishy about those three people. In this world, experts could conceal their true abilities if they wanted to. But no matter how brilliant a person was, they would not be able to choose extent he wished to reveal. Like Jun Moxie, they only had two choices. One was to conceal completely. The second was to not conceal anything. Old Master Jun was already at the second level of the peak of Spirit Xian. He was confident he was able to see through those who were lower than a Spirit Xian in their cultivation. But those three followers were obviously regular people, no matter how he looked at it. They were still ordinary people. So old Master Jun immediately raised his caution. There were only two possibilities. First, these three people were perhaps really ordinary people. Second, these three people were at a higher cultivation level than himself. So much higher that they could perfectly conceal their own capabilities so he couldn't tell. Old Master Jun did not even need to consider the first possibility. It definitely was the second one because anyone else could bring 3 such people out. But not Li Yuran. So these 3 people were definitely experts. And they were top-level experts. Although these 3 men were just like any regular person in their behavior, actions, and even aura. But they were definitely not like regular servants. And they were all expressionless, which made them even more dissimilar to normal servants. They didn't even know how to butter up and serve their master. If they were following old Master Jun, he would have kicked them straight out. The always demanding, arrogant, and perfectionist Li Yuran brought out 3 useless servants to visit. This was the biggest joke of Tianxiang City. So old Master Jun immediately thought of what his grandson had said. To mix truth and falsehood, kick up a cloud of dust and confuse the enemy. So old Master Jun immediately employed a suitable countermeasure. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 744. Mixing Truth and Lie. Old Master Jun smiled gently and said, "Please take a seat. The Jun family was impolite to not have served you properly." The 3 saints looked at Jun Tian and started to laugh loudly. With a smile, they settled into their seats. As expected, there is an expert. Knowing that they were seen through by the hidden expert, they decided to drop the pretense and reveal their real identities. Their expert airs oozed out instantly. Old Master Jun was truly a sly old fox to be able to make these 3 saints expose themselves without much change in attitude. But this was also partially due to the presumptions these 3 saints had that there was an unrivaled expert present. It would only be laughable if they continued to pretend to be ordinary people, so they might as well just drop the pretense and behave naturally. Li Yuran was about to jump with anger. "Aren't the 3 of you a little too easy to trick? You are saints. The absolute, strongest presence in this world. How could you guys expose yourselves so quickly after a couple of simple sentences from the other party? Who knew if Jun Tian was just testing us? Great. Now we've completely revealed ourselves. What testing do we still want to do? We were tested by the other party already." Jun Tian did not seem surprised, and his expression remained the same. He personally filled up tea cups for these 3 people. Smiling, he said, "In many years, it's really rare for such highly skilled experts to step foot into the Jun residence. But to think that 3 arrived today, it is truly a fascinating and commemorable affair. This tea is from the land of the cold amidst the misty clouds. It was subjected to the tempering of the heavens and earth, basking in the grace of the sun and the moon. By spring, only 3 budding leaves will grow, and when ready, it is harvested by the mouth and baked dry between soft breasts. Only by repeatedly doing these steps can this tea come about. This tea is the rumored Blizzard Lady 99 tea. I've heard that in all of history, the amount harvested every year never goes beyond 8 ounces. Even with billions of gold, it is still hard to come by. Do try it and see if it suits your tastes." With the joy of old friends at a gathering, Jun Tian diligently persuaded them to try the tea, seemingly showing off his treasure as well. "Oh, is this tea so expensive?" One of the saints raised his brows in amazement. He slowly lifted the teacup up and gently drank the tea. The tea was hot, but when it entered his mouth, it was like a path of ice going straight into the stomach, after which his internal organs began to feel warm and comfortable instantaneously. And the mouth was filled with that elegant fragrance of the tea. "Good tea. It really is good." He couldn't help but exclaim. Such a good tea is definitely worthy of being one of the best teas. Old Master Jun is truly blessed. Jun Xie replied happily. My grandson Mo Xia has spent a lot of hard work to getting me this to express his filial piety. I don't bear to drink it myself and usually just keep it as a treasure. But today, if I were to serve you 3 distinguished guests just regular tea, it would be very impolite of me. Speaking of discourtesy, I am really rude to not have asked for your great names after so long. No worries. I am Qi Tianfeng. This is my sworn brother Sa Qinglu and third brother, Cui Changhe. Qi Tianfeng smiled and continued slowly. Old Master Jun, I was wondering if we could meet the unrivaled Master if in the Jun residence. Since they were already exposed, they might as well get straight to the point and request to meet this mysterious master. If the situation wasn't good, they'd just run away. Furthermore, there was also the possibility of a what if. What if this expert was fortunately not that Nether 14th young master? With that person's brilliant and majestic skills, regardless of the magical pills, or the methods of allowing Xian beasts to undergo a complete change, if that person was ultimately harmonious and became an aid of the Supreme Golden City, then the strength of the city would definitely improve exponentially. All 3 of them were aware that this idea was filled with uncertainty, but it would be a good thing to have that possibility. So it was still a good idea to get straight to the point and ask to meet. These 3 people had escaped the ordinary world for quite a long time that none of their legends were passed down. Jun Xie had really never heard of these once glorified names. Hence with his character, he naturally would not make hypocritical or polite remarks, or anything of that sorts. Our 3 distinguished guests sure like to joke. How could there be an unrivaled master in our small Jun residence? Your words really make me embarrassed. Jun Xie sincerely replied, as if it was really from his heart. He shook his head guiltily as he spoke, as if he was feeling heartfelt embarrassment from being called unrivaled master. This person was bent on denying it. The 3 saints quickly exchanged glances. They were all extremely clear that it was just as they expected. You mean with the 3 of us combined, we are still unworthy of meeting that person? Qi Tianfeng laughed, slowly tapping at the table with his fingers as he enunciated each word. Though his tone was clearly oppressive, but his voice was still gentle and slow. But Jun Xie felt an odd sensation hearing his words. As if he had clearly seen those words fly up into the skies and exploded in the air, word by word. Like thunder on a fine day. The rage of the thunder god. But the nothing under the sky was affected. How could one clearly see words that were spoken, which were formless, fly out? This was something that could not be explained, but Jun Xie didn't think he saw wrongly. He had seen it. Saw it clearly for real. This was not his hallucination. He felt it. It was a mysterious feeling. Qi Tianfeng's prowess was completely revealed in that statement, openly challenging them. Revealing such a skill in the Jun residence was the same as blatant provocation. He believed that as long as that person existed, he had no reason not to make an appearance. As expected, just as this sentence flew into the sky, they all noticed Jun Xi's ears perk slightly. They focused and searched again, but they still couldn't find anything. What a mysterious skill. Please don't waste your energy. Jun Xie smiled and said, I just heard someone say it's not time yet. I wonder if you heard it as well. Ha ha ha. There was a hint of contempt in Jun Xi's tone. Everyone could tell. Contempt? It's not time yet? Qi Tianfeng felt his blood boiling, but he managed to suppress it. Laughing, he said, Not wrong. It is really not the right time yet. Saw Qing Lu and Chui Chang, he couldn't conceal the rage in their eyes. Not time yet? That person is clearly looking down on the three of us. In other words, he is saying that the three of us combined are still unworthy of making him come out. To think that there is someone so arrogant in this world. We already sent our provocation, but the other party still refuses to budge. With the status and position of these three saints, such a matter is extremely awkward for them. Especially that reply, "It's not time yet." This was undoubtedly saying, "You three are still not worthy enough. Not enough to get me to come out. Go and do what you need to do. To put it even more simply, go feck yourselves and leave me alone." This whole thing was too awkward. If it were another person, another place, these three people would have already made their move, wreaking havoc in this place to force that mysterious expert to show himself. But they were in the Jun residence and were potentially facing the legendary #1 evil. 9 Nether 14th Young Master. This fellow was notorious for seeking revenge for even the smallest of grievances. If they had truly enraged him, no one dared think of the consequences. Back then, 3 Holy Lands, Misty Illusory Manor, and Tian Fa Forest had joined forces, deploying a dozen saints with 3 Saint Kings leading the team. They used tricks and issued letter of challenge to fight him face to face, finally defeating him in one swoop. He was heavily injured and escaped, and was ultimately sealed in the Tian Fa Forest. That battle had caused unprecedented loss. And the thing that made everyone embarrassed about that victory seemed like it was by a stroke of luck. The 3 Holy and 1 Ferocious Lands and Misty Illusory Manor were only able to achieve this due to the arrogance of 9 Nether 14th Young Master. Otherwise, it would have been absolutely impossible. This 9 Nether 14th Young Master was haughty enough to take on the 3 Holy and 1 Ferocious Lands and Misty Illusionary Manor on his own. The area where this battle had taken place was in the mountainous area far from the mortal realms. But after this battle, all the surrounding small mountains in the area were flattened completely. Even half of that peak of the mountain that reached the clouds in the outside world was shaved off. The 9 Nether 14th Young Master eventually chose to escape because he couldn't win. But that was a decision that he made unwillingly, heavily injured, and near death. Despite sustaining such injuries, he still managed to kill his way out. This only proved that if the 9 Nether 14th Young Master wished to go, then no one and no power would be enough to hold him back. Even though his injuries were so serious that if they were transferred and divided on to 20 saints, all 20 would be dead. But he continued to drag his injured body and break his way through bravely, escaping thousands of miles into Tian Fa Forest. Such prowess was too fecking mystical. It was said that there were no less than 10 holes was stabbed right through the 9 Nether 14th Young Master's chest. But he could still fight. Still walk. Still escape. And he was still able to make all the other experts who had surrounded and attacked him pay an unbearable and heavy price. Qi Tianfeng and the rest were well aware that they were no match against someone of such capabilities. And since the other party said they were unworthy, then it looked like they really were. While the trio felt infuriated and insulted, but the other party was simply telling facts. So Qi Tianfeng could only suck it up. If he were to forcibly destroy the Jun residence, if he triggered the crazy revenge of 9 Nether 14th Young Master, let alone defeating the 3 of them, even if he were to challenge any single family in the 3 Holy Lands, that family would immediately be wiped off the surface of the earth. Then the 3 of them would become sinners for eternity. Li Yuran rolled his eyes before smiling and said, "Old Master Jun, since that senior has no intention of meeting us, then we naturally shall not insist on it. But I have another request for coming today. Although he wasn't very clear on what happened, he could guess that the three saints had already been defeated silently and had fallen into an absolute disadvantage. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 745. Heaven Defying Shock. Of course, Li Yuran had to change the topic here. If he didn't do so, then there was no way they could continue. Were they supposed to just let it be awkward? What business could you have? Old Master Jun wasn't as polite to Li Yuran as he was to the three saints, straight out pouring sarcasm. He rubbed his hands as if he were reminiscing the pleasant feeling from that day when he had slapped Li Yuran. I heard that Princess Ling Meng was almost assassinated and her life was in danger. Now that she is recuperating in the Jun residence, I wish to pay her a visit. After all, we were childhood friends who grew up together. And Princess Ling Meng is of distinguished status. It isn't right of me to not visit her. I'm not wrong to say this, right? Old Master Jun. You do have a point there. Of course we won't stop you from visiting her. But Princess Ling Meng is still in a state of unconsciousness. When you go and visit her, please do not disturb her. Jun Tian agreed simply after giving it some thought. If they could not even visit Ling Meng, then wouldn't it suggest that the Jun family obviously had a guilty conscience? Besides, it seemed like the preparations there were already ready. Thank you, Old Master Jun. Li Yuran gave his thanks politely. Jun Tian laughed and called Old Pang to lead them to visit Princess Ling Meng. Just as the three saints got up, so did Jun Tian, who stood up to send them out, seemingly reluctant to bid them goodbye. But the trio felt extremely awkward and didn't wish to stay for even a second longer. That single, "it's not time yet," had thoroughly hurt their pride. We are saints. Gadang it. Not even giving us a little respect. Following Old Pang, who was doing his catwalk and swinging his B*TT, was much better than meeting this Old Master Jun again. Because at least Old Pang was unaware of this matter. The five of them walked in a row into the inner courtyard of the Jun residence. With Old Pang gracefully doing his catwalk and leading the way, the three saints forcefully resisted the urge to kill the man and trailed behind Li Yuran, carefully analyzing the surroundings secretly. Suddenly, all three of them noticed at the same time that the air they were walking towards was odd. There was a burst of warmth and a refreshing feeling. It even had a tinge of the atmosphere of spring. Warm. Soft. The three of them snapped back to their senses, and a series of curses appeared in their minds. It can't be. Are we going to the place of that person? Isn't that the same as delivering a lamb into the tiger's den? Feck. The aura became more refreshing and soothing as they headed forward. But the look on the faces of the three saints also became heavier. Tianxiang City was closer to the north. And although it was already the second day of the second month of the year, the ice and snow outside showed no signs of melting. But in the Jun residence, it was a different world. Especially deeper into the house the farther you went, the more it felt like the beginning of spring. The willows on both sides of the path seemed a little limp, but the willow trees a couple of steps forward seemed to have a tinge of green to its branches. A greater surprise awaited them a few steps ahead. The willows were already popping out some small and tender green shoots. At the end of the path was Jun Moxie's courtyard. After Jun Moxie left, Princess Ling Meng had been recuperating in here. Because everything they saw on their way here clearly indicated that the 9 Nether 14th young master was within this courtyard. The two willow trees at the door were already sprouting with lush green leaves, hovering and swaying around. The perimeter walls of the courtyard were covered by the tentacles of countless of greenery. An entire wall of roses covered it. Waves of refreshing fragrance of flora could be smelt coming from the inside. The three saints inhaled a breath of cold air. Oh my God! Roses go in full bloom during warm seasons. This strange scene that existed purely in delusions actually happened in front of everyone. This was a peculiar event that was incomprehensible. The drizzle moistened my gown with wet apricot, the wind caressing my face with willow's chills. A poetic scene like had appeared before them, but it sent chills in the hearts of the three saints. Their hearts felt as cold as ice. Defying the heavens. This was an act of creation that defied the heavens. Something completely unheard of in all of history. There were two other courtyards on both sides. Though the other two were also green and lush, they were not as special as this one in the center. Clearly, it was a result of the influence from this courtyard in the middle. At this moment, the three saints had no room to advance or retreat. The three of them knew clearly that this elegant and cozy courtyard was the opened mouth of a demon. As long as they entered it today, their lives would no longer be under their own control. And they would immediately become puppets at the mercy of Nether 14th young master. To enter or not enter? The trio started to begrudgingly ran in their hearts at the same time. If we had directly taken our leave, there wouldn't be many problems. At the most, we only shamed ourselves. Then you just had to insist on visiting some princess. Great. Just great. We just stepped right into a trap. Looks like our three lives will be completely given away thanks to you. The despondence in their hearts could not be expressed in words. Old Pang, who was catwalking in front and leading the way, and Li Yuran were astonished by the three saints who had suddenly become hesitant. The two looked at the trio. What was going on? Old Pang really didn't understand. As the saying went, the older the wiser. Old Pang had already noticed that these three people's capabilities were inscrutable, but he could tell that they were much higher than those he had met before, at least higher than Venerable Mei, so he had taken extra precautions. Li Yuran was a little confused. With Old Master Jun's character, since he allowed us to enter and visit, even if there was some unrivaled master present, he would not launch a sudden attack. What's more, you three are already experts with the cultivation of a saint. Why are you still so cowardly? Was it so difficult to understand the ways of the world? Left without a choice, the three laughed bitterly. Whatever. Since we are already here, if we were to turn back without stepping inside, then do we still have the face to leave our mark in the pugilistic world? It's better to be beaten to death rather than being frightened to death. With this thought, the three of them continued to walk. Each step was coupled with great caution, and they all wore relatively tragic expressions. It's not that they didn't know the ways of the world. But the Nether 14th young master was famous for his fighting prowess and being iniquitous and unreasonable. As long as he didn't like the sight of you, he would attack you. Three seniors. Could it be that there is something wrong about this place? Li Yuran whispered carefully after observing their faces. Then he took another look at the place. Nothing seems off. This is just where Jun Moxie stays. I've visited before. And more than once. Or could it be that my own cultivation level is still too low, making it difficult to notice the huge danger lurking within? Wrong? It's beyond just wrong. How can an ignorant junior like you pry into this great mystery between heaven and earth? The three saints wore a dark expression and scoffed. They ignored Li Yuran and continued walking. Li Yuran knew he was being ignored, and rubbing his nose, he followed inside as well. It really is a unique courtyard, Li Yuran exclaimed as he stepped inside. The areas within the courtyard was verdant and lush. Red flowers contrasted nicely against their green leaves, and hundreds of beautiful flowers of brilliant hues were in full bloom. Be it the winter sweet that only bloomed in the cold winter, or the gold chrysanthemums that bloomed in autumn, or the orchids that bloomed in spring, or white lotus that bloomed in summer, they all swayed gracefully in the wind. A scenery like this, if it were placed in summer, autumn, or spring, there would be nothing odd about it. But the problem here was, it was still winter. This was too incomprehensible. But Li Yuran's unique remark made the faces of the three saints twitch. Unique? If you see our dead bodies lying on the ground, with our brains are split open, you'll find it even more fecking unique. To think you can praise such an eerie, terrifying, bizarre place with so much admiration in your face. We are in a huge crisis here. You ignorant fool. Just then, an odd voice said, "Who are you guys? What is your purpose here?" Following the direction of the voice, they were greeted by the sight of two children who were looking over at them with cold eyes. These two children held short swords and were missing a limb on their left and right arm each. Two cripples. Extremely mediocre and disabled children. But these two disabled children might have been young and mediocre, but every inch of them made other people feel a cold, killing intent. Gadang it. As expected, an abnormal place will have abnormal people. Two random crippled children were born cold-blooded killers. Did you see the brutality and coldness in those two pairs of eyes? A gaze that views human lives as mere nothing. How many people have they killed? Even a general who had crawled his way back through heaps of corpses and oceans of blood in his many years of being on the battlefield was unlikely to even have such a huge killing intent like them. The few of us have lived for a few hundred years, but the fresh blood on our hands may not even be comparable to these two children. Then, looking at the short swords in the hands of these two children, the three saints were taken aback again. The blades of the swords were narrow, long and sharp, with a faint shade of the color of blood. It clearly had seen blood, and definitely multiple times. Only a sword that was nourished with human blood could have such color. There were no hand guards, no tassels, and most likely no scabbards either. There were only two deep fullers on the sword body. These were clearly swords meant for killing, and always ready to kill, whenever and wherever. Another thing that had surprised the three saints was that the two children before them really mediocre abilities. Even if they had an expert to guide them, it would be unlikely for them to achieve anything great. But upon a closer look, these two kids did not develop a solid foundation from young, but had achieved their current Earth Xian cultivation within a short period of time. This was enough to make the jaws of countless people drop. A person who achieved an Earth Xian cultivation at 10 years old wasn't rare or surprising. It was possible if one was talented and well endowed, and had built a solid foundation from young. But how did these two disabled kids achieve this level of cultivation with their endowments and foundation? Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 746. Blows. The answer was too obvious, and there was no need for consideration. It definitely was the work of the expert hiding in the Jun residence. It looked like this person's brilliant creation skills were not only limited in its use on Xian beasts, but also on humans. And it completely ignored the original user's natural talent and endowments. Truly magical. Without a doubt, in time, these two disabled children would grow and become cold-blooded assassins who would shock the world. The three saints could foresee it. Even if these two brats killed every single person in this world, they wouldn't even be emotionally moved even the tiniest bit. Born to be assassins. Naturally cold-blooded. Gadang it. Where did all these monsters come from? The three saints felt powerless. Why are there so many strange and odd things gathered in here? We haven't even met the man himself. But we are already depressed from all the blows. Two little brothers. We are here to visit Princess Ling Meng. Li Yuran put on an affable and amiable smiling face and spoke gently. Li Yuran didn't have the perceptiveness and knowledge of the three saints, although he did feel that those two children gave off a vibe that made people uncomfortable. He did not pay it any heed. If those two children weren't part of the Jun family, he wouldn't even be bothered by them. Li Yuran was actually waiting for old Pang to help him do the introductions, but he realized that the fellow had already snuck away when he turned around to look for him. After scolding old Pang in his head for a while, left without a choice, Li Yuran had to do it himself. Visit Princess Ling Meng? Who you? Why are you smiling so disgustingly? Are you sick? The voice came from the child on the left, but the intonation was exceptionally strange. A pair of eyes that were like the blade of an actual sword shot daggers at Li Yuran. Li Yuran actually left a sharp pain in his eyes. Scary. But the three saints had simultaneously discovered another unfathomable thing. This child was speaking, but not with his mouth. His mouth still remained close, not even moving. But his voice just came out like that. Where did it come from? The three saints could tell, the stomach. When he spoke, the clothes near his abdomen swelled up a little. Clearly, he had created intonations with the vibrations of his abdominal cavity to speak. What the feck? That's a demon right there. The three saints felt like they were really breaking down at this moment. Why is there something so mysterious happening again? This is too puzzling. Could it be that these two children are not only crippled, but also mutes? Or not? Why are they not speaking properly with their mouths? Oh, I'm Li Yuran. Huh. Two little brothers. Let us pass. We are all good people. Li Yuran took out 2 gold ingots and handed them over, his smile turning even more kind and gentle. So you are the hypocrite Li Yuran. The child looked at the gold in his hand disdainfully and rolled his eyes. Continuing in that peculiar intonation, he said, "We've heard of you from a long time ago. You are a lecherous demon capable of all sorts of evil. You are tyrannical, taking advantage of everyone, and also extremely hypocritical. When you smile at someone, there are definitely no good intentions behind it. Why are you still smiling at me? What are you trying to get at?" Li Yuran smiled bitterly. What the hell? When did my image become like this? Lecherous demon? Capable of all sorts of evil? These words you just said seem to be describing your young master Jun Moxie. But why are they used on me? I may have committed some evil in my life, but it's always behind people's backs. No one knows of it. Tian can. Why are you still chatting with them? If they want to visit Sister Ling Meng, then just let them in. We'll just watch from the side. Is there anyone in this world who can play tricks right in front of us? The child on the right finally spoke as well, but also in that odd intonation without opening his mouth. And this child was extremely confident. Was there anyone in this world who could play tricks right in front of them? 2 kids. Why are you not speaking with your mouths? Is it very fun to speak with your bellies? Chi Tian Feng asked with a smile. The 2 children shot him a disdainful look, as if they were looking at a moronic, retarded person. They said at the same time, "Fun my ass. If we were able to speak with our mouths, we would have spoken with them a long time ago. You're already so old. But how is it that you are still an idiot?" Then they both opened their mouths simultaneously before closing it. A contemptuous expression appeared on their faces. The three saints laughed bitterly. In that split second, they had seen it very clearly. The tongues of these two children had been cut completely off. No wonder they look at us with such disdain, so that's the reason. From their perspective, he had indeed asked a completely stupid question. Your young master is really cruel. To cut off your tongues. Sa Qing Lu squinted, teasing these two children. Don't you dare insult our young master. The two children shot a murderous glare, like a venomous snake baring its teeth. Who cut our tongues is none of your business. How does it even concern you? Didn't you come to visit Sister Ling Meng? If you're not going in, then please leave. Li Yuran and the three saints laughed bitterly, at a loss about what to do with these children with such odd temperaments. The four of them entered the room, and Tian, Can and DK followed behind them, watching them with worry in their eyes. Princess Ling Meng was still unconscious, lying inside Jun Moxie's room with four maids serving her. A flash of sorrow appeared in Li Yuran's eyes. He walked over slowly, hoping to take a closer look, but a small figure flashed before him. Tian Can stood, blocking his eye. He glared at him. Look from here. Do not go any closer, or I'll kill you. Don't stay, that I didn't warn you. A sword flashed and Li Yuran felt his body turning cold. A narrow, short sword was already pointing at him. In that moment, facing this little kid and a sword that was just like a toy sword, Li Yuran felt all the hair on his body standing up and chills running down his spine. As if the person before him was not a 10-year-old child, but a venomous, poisonous snake. And this snake was ready to devour someone. Li Yuran took 2 steps back quickly and tried his best to smile even more gently. He whispered, Big brother here only wishes to take a look and see if we can save your sister Ling Meng. We have no use for your fake kindness. Sister Ling Meng is my young master's woman. Even if she dies, she is my young master's ghost. What does this have to do with you? Do we need you to sympathize? Tian Can looked at him scornfully, seemingly eager to stab a bloody gash across this handsome face. Although his intonation was odd, but it was full of murderous intent. At this point, Cui Chang he shook his head and gave Li Yuran a look. Li Yuran understood and said, If that's the case, then I shall take my leave and visit again another day. No need. You don't have to come back for the rest of your life. If you appear before us again, it'll be our swords that shall greet you. This was said by DK, who was even more cold and aloof. Li Yuran and the three saints slowly made their way out. But they could hear Tian, Can and DK speaking softly inside with their weird intonations. They claimed to be paying a visit. Clearly they came with bad intentions. Exactly. Not even bringing any gifts when coming to visit. That's too impolite. I can't even be bothered to look down on him. Not even knowing how to put up an act. Someone like this has the cheek to call himself Tian Xiang's gifted scholar. Number 1 vegetable seeds sounds more right, ha ha ha. Yeah. He's not even as thoughtful as we are. No wonder young master often said that this fellow looks clever but is actually a moron. We are physically disabled. But he is mentally disabled. More disabled than us. How could you speak so blindly? Other than having his limbs, how could he even compare to us? True. I've said something wrong. How could he even be compared to us? Li Yuran almost vomited an entire mouthful of blood. He was exceedingly wealthy and clever. Who wasn't in awe and fear of him? To think that he was being looked down upon by 2 kids in the Jun family, to be held in contempt in such an arrogant, unrestrained manner. Just at this moment, there was an adorable shout. Li Yu ran. Why did a pervert like you come out from there? Say it. Did you have bad intentions? It was Dugu Xiao, with Snowy wagging its tail and trailing behind her. Her bright eyes glared mercilessly at Li Yu ran, as if she had seen a complete lecher. I have come to visit Princess Ling Meng. Why? Is there a problem? Since their arrival, nothing had gone smoothly, and there was absolutely no gain. Even his final goal of visiting Princess Ling Meng wasn't achieved. He was already feeling frustrated over this matter. But at Dugu Xiaoyi's fierce accusations, he was even more unhappy. Why am I a lecher? Young Master Li Yu ran, who had always had an easygoing personality, lost his temper for the first time. Li Yu ran might have been ruthless, heartless, and willing to sacrifice anyone without hesitation when needed anyone, including Princess Ling Meng. But Princess Ling Meng was still the only woman he had truly loved in his life. This was an undeniable fact. Watching his beloved woman lying in bed and not knowing whether she'd pull through, his heart was bleeding. But to be told, Sister Ling Meng is my young master's woman. Even if she dies, she is my young master's ghost. What does this have to do with you? This sentence had dealt a huge blow to Li Yu ran. It was a blow that had hit directly and heavily in the deepest of his heart, making this young master Li Yu ran, who had always been sophisticated and had never revealed his emotions on his face, vomit blood on the spot. What man in this world would not be affected, seeing the woman he loved deeply get called another person's woman? Not immediately picking up his sword and engaging in a fight already counted as having extreme self-preservation. So Dugu Xiaoyi's angry accusation triggered the fury in his heart. Visit Ling Meng? Is Sister Ling Meng someone you should even see? Li Yu ran. Why are you pretending to be righteous? Did you really think that no one would know of what you've done? Dugu Xiaoyi was enraged. And as Princess Ling Meng's best friend, Dugu Xiaoyi was extremely clear about everything regarding Princess Ling Meng. Furthermore, after listening to Jun Moxie's detailed explanation, Dugu Xiaoyi felt extremely disgusted at Li Yu ran. And Li Yu ran dared to talk back. All of the anger in Dugu Xiaoyi rose and she began to scream and shout angrily. She had came over on Old Master Jun's orders to provoke them, so she logically displayed her might. Old Master Jun's arrangements were fitted perfectly together. He was confident that even if a deity arrived, this countermeasure would be able to achieve the effects he had expected. As Dugu Xiaoyi jumped out, Old Master Jun stroked his beard while reading a military warfare book, completely immersed in it. Li Yu ran? You may be clever, but you are still young. Trying to play tricks in front of me? Let's not even talk about you. Even your grandfather Li Shang is too green for it. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 747. Giving further thought and discussing it later. No matter what I've done, Ling Meng is ultimately the only woman I, Li Yu ran, think highly of. Li Yu ran declared calmly, not backing down at all. You still dare to say that? You despicable, shameless hypocrite. I'm going to kill you. Dugu Xiaoyi yelled angrily and suddenly soared into the air. Her slender body formed a beautiful arc that cut across the air. And with a sudden toss of her sleeves, she brandished a knife that flashed and cut down like a bolt of lightning. It was like a flash of lightning across azure skies, but surreal like a dream and beautiful like an fantasy, but cold with the intention to kill. The first knife of Tian Xiang. Pocket knives. The first stroke, pocket knife soft winnowing. A knife skill that stepped across two worlds. Taught and personally imparted by Jun Moxie. At the sight of such an extraordinary use of the knife, even the three saints who had vast experiences couldn't hide their surprise. So gorgeous and ethereal, yet also formidable, what a wondrous knife skill. Even with all three of them combined in knowledge and experience, this was something they had never seen before. Li Yuran did not expect this girl to actually brandish a knife and start killing, so he was in a poor situation. He quickly tilted his head back, and a few strands of hair were cut off and blown away by the wind. Dugu Xiao had gotten the first strike in one stroke, so she continued to rain attacks continuously in an imposing manner. The second stroke, pocket knife fragrance. The third stroke, pocket knife dream. Followed by pocket knife clouds, pocket knife dance. The three saints were completely dazzled and stunned, constantly praising as they watched on, completely engrossed. Dugu Xiaoyi's negligible Xian cultivation was naturally not interesting, but her knife skills were really exquisite. They even felt like they could see some essence of martial arts in the way she used knives, but it wasn't complete enough for them to be able to distinguish it, which showed that the profoundness of this set of knife skills was way beyond their knowledge and experiences. Li Yuran was in an extremely pathetic state, incessantly complaining in his head. His Xian cultivation level was originally a few times higher than Dugu Xiaoyi. But over this period of time, Dugu Xiaoyi had been shoving all sorts of divine medication and pills into her mouth as if she were eating candies. So she had improved greatly, seemingly not weaker than Li Yuran. Coupled with such clever knife skills, even though she was still lacking in experience, it was not difficult. Dugu Xiaoyi did her best to exhibit all that she had learnt, steadily gaining the upper hand. She felt awfully high-spirited. She had been bullying others all her life, but she had never felt this sort of gratification. And she was now bullying someone whom she had always disliked. In the past, she wanted to bully him, but she couldn't win. But now, he. A feeling like this was too darn good. So her attacks became more ferocious and imposing. Li Yuran suddenly screamed, stumbling back and losing all his deportment. His legs turned into jelly and he fell onto his B*TT. Pocket knife destroy dreams. Dugu Xiaoyi shouted, attacking as quickly and fiercely as lightning and thunder, aiming at the top of Li Yuran's head. Li Yuran felt the wind from the knife brush against his face. His heart turned cold and he thought, am I actually going to die here today? Suddenly Tian moved and stopped the pocket knife with two of his fingers when it was a few inches away from Li Yuran's scalp. Using a little bit of strength, he snatched it from the girl. He looked at it and marveled. Truly excellent knives. Excellent knife skills. Then he gently tossed the knife back to Dugu Xiaoyi and spoke gently. Young lady, when it is possible to let people off, one should spare them. Always leave a chance. It will be better if you cross paths with each other again. Then he pulled Li Yuran up and said, let's go. Li Yuran was still in a shocked daze. Only after they had exited the doors of the Jun residence had he regained his senses and finally noticed that there was something off about the three saints' expressions. Right before they had walked out of the Jun residence, Cui Chang he had even crushed a floor tile with his steps. Looking at their clothes, their backs were completely soaked. In such a cold winter weather. What was happening? That was a close call. Tian finally groaned after heaving a sigh. This saint couldn't help but lift his hand to wipe the cold sweat off his face. Close call? Li Yuran asked in surprise. Which part was dangerous? How come I didn't notice even the slightest danger? Could he mean that encounter I had just now? That was too unlikely, based on the abilities of three saints. Although the girl's abilities were beyond what I had expected, there shouldn't be any danger. It really was a narrow escape. Sa Qinglu sighed and glared at Li Yuran. Snapping at him, he said, "We three almost lost our lives thanks to you. But you're still completely unaware of it." Ha! Li Yuran was really surprised now. If my guess is not wrong, Jun Moxie's mysterious master was in that courtyard we entered. Cui Chang he rubbed his head and sighed before continuing. It was truly beyond our expectations. Did you not notice that in that courtyard, not a single thing made sense? Not a single thing was something you've seen or heard of before. Be it objects or people. Sharp. As expected. Qi Tianfeng looked up to the skies for a long time before letting out a deep sigh. It was only now that the three of them felt more relaxed. Li Yuran, on the other hand, felt like he was listening to a heavenly book, completely confused and understanding nothing. He didn't know what these three old men were saying. Even if there were things that did not obey the seasons, that was no reason to be so frightened, right? Roses go in full bloom in the summer. This was the first abnormality. In the eyes of most people, it is just unusual scenery, but in our eyes, it is an act of defying the heavens. Something like this is the same as snow falling in the month of June or thunder during winter. Qi Tianfeng said a heavy tone, raising a finger. The two children talked with their bellies since they were unable to talk with their mouths. This was the second abnormality. Sa Qinglu continued. This is something beyond comprehension. In the millions of years of Xian continent, there has never been such an odd situation. A martial art of such peculiarity. Third is that Princess Ling Meng that was lying in bed. Cui Chang he sighed. It is not that she cannot wake up, but someone intentionally prevented her from waking up. This person used a skillful method to control her body to make her fall into a deep sleep and controlled extremely minute areas within her body. I am second to none when it comes to medical knowledge. But even when faced with such a situation, I am unable to be of help. Because as long as some abnormal Xian Qi is poured into her, her body will be damaged forever without any chance of recovery. And those exquisite knife skills of that girl. They have never appeared in this world. If not for the girl having negligible abilities, had the person using those knife skills had the cultivation level of even a first-level venerable, even we may not be able to save you easily. And that rank 8 iron-winged panther cub. This is something that is completely impossible. But they had all happened before our eyes. The three saints looked at each other with a complicated expression in their eyes after sharing these abnormalities. Ha! Li Yuran was really surprised and shocked. He had never expected that there were so many mysteries embedded in those abnormal occurrences that he had seen along the way. It must be known that Li Yuran had superb wisdom and unique vision, and was capable of finding opportunities and devising strategies and winning battles thousands of miles away. He was smooth and slick enough to make everything go his way. But he also has his weakness. And it was a fatal one. That was that his Xian cultivation level was not high. This severely restricted his experiences and knowledge. All the things the saints had noticed he couldn't. Even if he had seen it, he wouldn't have been able to understand it. Though the saints had noticed so much. But truly, it was just them scaring themselves. Li Yuran was unaware. But he was more at ease than them. And this was a blessing on its own. Ignorance was bliss. Let's go. We need to reconsider and assess with regards as to how to go about handling the Jun family. After we go back, contact the 6 saints from the illusory blood sea and the elusive world of immortals immediately. We need to meet and discuss our plot in detail. Looks like the situation is worse. Much worse than what we had expected. Tian turned around and looked at the dense aura covering and hovering about the Jun residence and sighed deeply. He said weakly, I had originally expected before coming that it was definitely dangerous. But I had never expected that it could be this treacherous. Now, I can confirm that the unrivaled master hiding in the Jun residence is definitely that person. Sa Qing Lu and Chui Chang he shivered and said at the same time, 9 Nether 14th young master. Is this 9 Nether 14th young master very powerful? Li Yuran was a little puzzled. Compared to a few saints. Could he be? Li Yuran didn't continue his sentence, feeling like it was a little insulting to make a statement like this. Saints? Qi Tianfeng scoffed coldly. In the hands of the 9 Nether 14th young master, what are saints? In the Supreme Golden City, there are 2 disabled saints. One has a huge gaping hole in his chest and the other lost half of his skull. Although they managed to survive with great difficulty through their Xian skills and stubborn lives, it's already been hundreds of years, but they are still unable to recover their original state. Chui Chang he sighed and added, you have to know that for a saint, as long as your spirit is still intact and you have not lost your life, you can regenerate and grow back your disabled limbs elsewhere. But of the saints that were injured in the hands of the 9 Nether 14th young master, not a single one was able to recover. The 9 Nether 14th young master. Li Yuran repeated this name, and his heart completely shocked. To think that there was such a terrifying existence in this world. The 4 continued to head back without a word. Qi Tianfeng only sent a single order, all 9 saints must gather and meet tonight. If this matter is not discussed thoroughly, in the event that we engage in battle, the entire Tianxiang city and its surroundings within a 1,000-mile radius will be completely destroyed. And the thing most concerning is whether the 9 of us stand a chance of victory. There is the danger of overturning at any moment. We definitely must not act recklessly. On the other side, in the snowy mountains, Jun Moxie was extremely worried. He looked at the people of Blizzard Silver City working hard to rebuild Blizzard Silver City and clean up the ruins, but Han Feng Shui has completely disappeared. And he was being held back by Shui Shuangqing, who was bombarding him with questions, worrying if he was feeling warm or cold. Her diligence in trying to take care of him was almost catching up to his mother. Jun Moxie was getting a little impatient and annoyed. I'm a 2nd level venerable, no cold or heat can get to me. Can I still possibly get a cold? Finally, Han Zhanmeng couldn't continue watching and interrupted, asking her to go prepare some food. Jun Moxie let out a sigh of relief, then snuck off secretly. Checking that no one was paying attention, he disappeared in a flash. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 748. Treacherous traversing in the ground. Activating both the yin-yang escape art and the power of earth at the same time, Jun Moxie reached the deepest of the ground within the blink of an eye. And this location happened to be right under the center of the Blizzard Silver City Hall. The mysterious energy that Jun Moxie had encountered last time came from here. Jun Moxie felt the Hongjun Pagoda turning at high speed with a hong in his head the moment he had gone into the ground, and with unusual enthusiasm. The heavy sensation he experienced last time had also begun to thicken again. This entire area underground seemed like a huge swamp, and he was right in it. And he could only move forward with great struggle. You're excited, but you can't just be excited alone. We are underground. Do you know how much spiritual energy is required to use both the yin-yang escape art and the power of earth at the same time? Plus, every step we take, we need to break past this unimaginably heavy obstructing force. If you're not going to help, How could I survive making past this? Are you planning to kill me? Jun Moxie complained in his head. But these were not empty words. If he didn't have a cheat code like the Hongjun Pagoda, based off of Jun Moxie's own capabilities only, it would definitely be hard for him to maintain this for a long period of time. And once he ran out of spiritual energy, regardless of how miraculous they both were, both the yin-yang escape art and the power of earth would lose their effectiveness without spiritual energy as the driving force. Then someone would turn into a tragedy straight away. But Hongjun Pagoda still made no movements, only rapidly spinning and anticipating excitedly, showing no signs or intentions to open the doors to release spiritual qi. Looks like this fellow hasn't finished digesting after overeating. Jun Moxie sighed in resentment. I'm so ill-fated. Looks like I have relied on myself to achieve this. I'll save some of my resources and pray that it is enough to last me till there. Let's not even talk about how I'm slogging my life to sustain through this. And the most depressing thing is, all this is done for the sake of the Hongjun Pagoda. How much benefit I will gain from this is hard to tell. This caused Jun Moxie to feel a little unfair. With a mentality of not wasting his energy, he tested out a step in all four directions. Jun Moxie then made a decision to drill his way northwest. Because it was the direction which was most difficult to break through amongst all four directions. And its density was even more obvious. If there was really something good here, it must be there. Nothing else to say. I'm risking it. Succeed or die. Jun Moxie took a deep breath and began to spin rapidly in the soil, turning faster and faster, eventually forming a tornado. At the highest speed of the spinning, he positioned himself horizontally. With a strong kick with his legs against the soil behind him, he shot forward like an arrow. The top of Jun Moxie's head was like a drill rotating at high speed, drilling his way right through. This was the most energy-conserving method that Jun Moxie could think of for the beginning stage. This one drill had covered a dozen of meters. Jun Moxie felt his scalp heating up from the constant friction of spinning at a high speed, and a fiery burning sensation developed on his scalp. He couldn't help but cursed in his heart, "Feck. My head full of hair can't possibly be ruined like this, right? I'll really get an heartache. Although it's a bit longer and gets in the way sometimes. But if I became bald, that'd be too unflattering." The spinning began to weaken and finally came to a stop. Jun Moxie stood upright again, and the first thing he did was touch the top of his head, and he let out a sigh of relief. There was still hair, but the sudden wave of hot friction earlier caused it to become a little curly. This is a new discovery. I wonder if I could use this method to invent perming skills. At the same time, Jun Moxie calculated the distance and couldn't help but bite his tongue. Had it been in the air, he could have covered a distance of a few hundred meters with what he did earlier. But in this ground, he had only drilled his way through a short distance of a dozen zhang. And the location that he was in currently was even denser and thicker, with even larger and obstructing force. Almost like a giant silkworm cocoon, binding himself within. There was extreme difficulty in moving even his fingers. Jun Moxie tried to regulate his xian efficacy to absorb the lingering energy in this space, only to release that he couldn't absorb it at all. It looked like this obstructing force was not a condensation of odd heaven-earth spiritual qi, but a mysterious type of energy that he was not aware of. There's no other choice. Let's continue to drill. Jun Moxie was also getting aggressive. I don't believe that I can't drill my way through. I'm going all out. He activated the art of unlocking heaven's fortune to level up his skills. Jun Moxie closed his mouth and gritted his teeth as he inched his way across, one step at a time. A long while passed. Jun Moxie couldn't be bothered to maintain his image. So he sat on his B*TT and panted heavily. Hot beads of perspiration drenched his head and evaporated into white steam that was instantly absorbed into the earth. This is too darn difficult. Jun Moxie was feeling little helpless. At the beginning, he could still advance with big steps, and although there was great obstruction, it wasn't significant enough to prevent him from moving ahead. But over here, his movements were greatly reduced. He could only inch forward. And there was a strong repelling force in here. If he did not quickly use 1000 caddy drop to stabilize himself for every 1 inch he moved forward, he would have been repelled a few meters back by that force. If not for Jun Moxie's quick reactions, he might very well have been repelled back countless of times already. Then he could already stop planning anything else for today. He was really getting a little exhausted now. Even with his powerful skills as a level 2 venerable, plus the effects of the art of unlocking heaven's fortune, the pushing force of yin-yang escape, and the power of earth, after such a long time, he had only advanced less than 50 zhang. Plus that initial 12 zhang he had covered earlier, it was a distance of only around 60 zhang. In common terms, 180 meters. Jun Moxie could vaguely sense that he was not far from the core of this weird energy. A safe guess would be that it was a few zhang away. But those few zhang felt as far away as having to cross 1,000 mountains and 10,000 rivers. So near yet so far. The density, restraints, repulsion, and even a mysterious spinning force increased as he approached. Spinning clockwise. Anti-clockwise, it was a type of spinning force that caused one to lose his sense of balance involuntarily. Jun Moxie was sure that if it weren't for him being equipped with the remarkable abilities of the yin-yang escape and the power of earth, if he were an ordinary person, or even an expert of the Saint King level, he couldn't even move a single step forward. This type of energy was truly too odd. But Jun Moxie had also thought of another point at the same time. Since this place has such an odd and great energy protecting it, then what sort of heaven-defying object could be inside? It did make sense. If it was not something extremely powerful and precious, why would the Hongjun Pagoda be so urgent? With Hongjun Pagoda's picky eating habits, how could it be an ordinary object? After taking a break, Jun Moxie finally continued his next endeavor. Temporarily losing the aid of the Hongjun Pagoda, Jun Moxie could only use the art of unlocking heaven's fortune like his life depended on it. He could feel and hear the whooshing sounds of the spiritual energy circulating in his veins. A feeling like this was invigorating. But Jun Moxie's disappearance left Condor King and Shuangqing above on the surface extremely worried. Shuangqing was puzzled. Why did my future good son-in-law just disappear like that? What should I do? I still have questions I haven't finished asking. The Condor King was even more anxious. Brother-in-law disappeared. Where did he go? I'm going to faint. I thought I could benefit by following brother-in-law alone and could eat something good. Who knew that I barely followed him for barely half a day when he just suddenly disappeared? What should I do? Jun Moxie had already disappeared for 3 whole days. Only Han Zhanmeng had an extra consideration. It couldn't be that this unpredictable fellow had found his way to the biggest secret of the Blizzard Silver City, right? Although he knew it wasn't possible, he still snuck back to take a look. But only his father, Han Fengshui, was alone inside, with no other abnormalities. Facing his father's surprised look, Han Zhanmeng felt relieved, and he genuinely began to wonder where Jun Moxie ran off to. I don't think there is anything else in Blizzard Silver City that would catch his fancy. But no one thought that Jun Xie stubbornly battled that mysterious energy underground for 3 days. 3 whole days. As the last day passed by, Jun Xie felt like a catfish that had been tossed on land, thoroughly exhausted. But he could confirm that he was definitely less than half a meter distance away from that goddamn energy. Right now, that weird, repulsive force was extremely strong. Jun Xie didn't even dare to lift his foot up to move forward. He could only worm his way forward with his entire body, advancing inwards a millimeter by a millimeter. Young Master Jun had suffered greatly from Hongjun Pagoda's lack of aid. Although he was still in the state of the yin-yang escape, he could clearly feel that there were countless places on his body that hurt from all the grinding. He used the divine sword to slowly cut through that mysterious energy, then slowly squeezed himself into that small opening he had created. Heaven! Earth! My God! Jun Xie really felt like crying. A torturous experience like this. I don't want to go through it a second time ever again. Finally. At the last moment, Jun Xie felt as if he had just pierced through an odd balloon made of a weird material. Although it was difficult to pierce through, but once it was broken, the entire balloon started to disintegrate, and an unimpeded feeling passed through the sword and into his chest. But before he could celebrate it, he was tossed out by an immense, terrifying force that he couldn't oppose at all. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 749. Bizarre Encounter. Yes. Tossed out. Like a person who had eaten something bad, eagerly excreting the disgusting, foul-smelling object out of his body with a swish. Jun Xie was caught unprepared and got sucked straight in. It all happened quickly, and he was left dazzled and unable to see clearly. Then, his body hit a stone wall. Real and solid. Pooh. Mommy. Jun Xie couldn't help but howl in pain, feeling as if every bone, muscle, and tendons was in extreme agony and pain. After a long while, he finally regained consciousness. Biting his teeth as he opened his eyes to look around, he took in a deep breath of cold air at the sight. This place, what the feck? It's too beautiful. Following that strange flow, he found himself in an unusually big underground palace. It was 1,000 feet wide and about 100 feet high. Looking across this place, it was full of glittering jewels and treasures. Everything one could think of existed in this place. Yes, everyone is reading correctly. The place Jun Xie had entered was not the same place as the secret chamber Han Feng Shui mediated and trained in. Or rather, that secret chamber lied above this huge palace, and this palace Jun Xie entered was under it. Well, the distance in between. It wasn't measured before. The thing that thoroughly captivated Jun Xie's attention was the huge 16 words. 16 tyrannical and domineering words. Carved into the stone wall right in front of him. And those 16 characters were of the same color as the stone wall. It shouldn't have been easy to read, but it was oddly striking. Anyone who just entered this place would naturally notice these 16 large words. As if these 16 huge words had a soul of a human and were flaunting their arrogance. As though they were about to fly off the stone wall and into the skies. Since ancient times, there has been no one like him, the Nether first young master. It's the words left behind by the #1 lunatic of all times. And even the arrogant young Master Jun was deeply moved by those 16 words. Suddenly he felt a little envious. God dang it. Look at how other people live. And look at how they mingle. Then look at yourself, you simply cannot speak of the two of us on equal terms. Jun Moxie removed the yin-yang escape art and kept the power of earth before getting back up on his feet and dusting the dirt off his body. Too bloody weird. I was clearly using the yin-yang escape. So I'm technically formless. But where did all this dirt come from? Whatever. Let's not harp on things that cannot be understood. Putting his hands behind his back, he began to tour around the place ostentatiously, like a king inspecting his own territory. So what if you're super strong? Now this entire place belongs to the surname Jun. Jun Moxie laughed and was about to inspect the goods when suddenly the stone wall with those 16 characters rumbled. With a whoosh, a scroll fell from the top, falling right in his face. This scroll wasn't made of gold or jade and was extremely soft. After falling onto the ground, it opened up on its own. The first 5 words were like 5 strokes of lightning that hit and penetrated deep inside Jun Moxie's soul. Jun Xie, you have come. Jun Moxie felt all the hot blood rush to his head. He felt as if he were seeing stars. He gasped for air heavily, as if he were suffocating. The shock in his heart seemed almost as if it were going to shatter his soul completely. It was clear that this was the handwriting of the 9 Nether first young master. And he had written, Jun Xie, you have come, and not Jun Moxie, you have come. There was a difference of only 1 word, but there was a vast difference between the two. Jun Xie was his name in his previous life. And in this life of Jun Moxie, there was no one else who could know of this name. Reading it forward was his original name and flipping it around was his nickname. Jun Xie, evil monarch. But how did this legend of a millions of years, the 9 Nether first young master, know of his name? And the name of his previous life? Suddenly, a huge doubt began to surface in Jun Moxie's heart. Tian City, the second prince's residence, secret room. 12 people gathered and sat in 3 directions, but all of them wore an especially solemn and gloomy expression. The owner of this space, the second Prince Yang Dan, was not present, simply because he had no rights to engage in this high-level discussion. Or rather to say, other than Li Yuran, all the other people in this room had the ability to destroy the entire Tian City easily. That's the gist of it. Qi Tianfeng said slowly. So the 3 of us did not dare act recklessly, returning back to discuss what should we do about this situation with all of you here. We still need everyone to come together to make a decision together. My side thinks that we shouldn't act too impulsively. After all, that person's capabilities are truly terrifying. I will not even talk about his fighting abilities. Based on what we had witnessed today, all those brilliant and skillful methods go way beyond our experience and knowledge. If any sudden change occurs, there will be a very high risk. And the war for seizing the heavens is drawing close. If we were to engage in battle, regardless of how it ends, it is still too early to tell. Li Yuran, Qi Tianfeng, and the other 2 occupied the seats facing east. Qi Tianfeng finished sharing their encounters in the Jun residence. The 4 seated that were seated toward the north, donning white clothes, were people from elusive world of immortals. 2 were elderly with white hair, white brows, and a white beard, with a very simple and tranquil appearance. Besides them were 2 middle-aged men with gentle expressions. The illusory Blood Sea members sat facing the south. Zi Jinghong sat in the last seat, while 3 other middle-aged men, donning purple robes, sat beside him. After listening to Qi Tianfeng's description, one of the white-robed elderly men frowned. His long eyebrows tilted down and he said, "If it is like Brother Qi has said, looks like, It may really be the 9 Nether 14th young master inside? But wasn't the 9 Nether 14th young master sealed in Tian Fa forest? How did he suddenly reappear in here? I was also unable to decide because of this. If it was really the 9 Nether 14th young master in there. But based on all this few evidences we've gotten so far, there is really no one else that I know of in this world who can do it. Qi Tianfeng said hesitantly. To completely restructure a Xian beast that can only reach level 7 at its peak. Other than godly skills, I believe it requires a substantial cultivation level as well. And to act like this, the way I see it, is basically recklessly destroying heaven's work. It was probably because of extreme boredom with nothing else to do. The old saint in white robe stood up slowly and walked around with his hands behind his back. Frowning, he said, "No doubt the 9 Nether 14th young master has this ability. If he had nothing to do when he was sealed and was extremely bored, it makes absolute sense for him to have made a mythical Xian beast. But there are also countless other experts in the continent. The 9 Nether 14th young master may not be the only one who was extremely bored. Let me ask everyone, in that endless drought and boredom during practice, how many people could really? Ha 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 ha." He did not spell it clearly, but the meaning was obvious. Everyone present couldn't help but nod in agreement, deeply empathizing. When one reached a position as high as a saint's, most people wouldn't attempt to steer away from loneliness. They needed to sit quietly in solitude, trying to figure out the secrets of heaven and earth and seek that sudden stroke of enlightenment. Only then could they experience another breakthrough. This required silence and only silence. But everyone was still a social animal inside. Being away from people, that sort of loneliness was enough to drive even the most cultured of people insane. And at times like this, they needed to find some sort of entertainment. So everyone generally tried to suit themselves by planting flowers or growing some magical herbs, purely for the sake of diverting their boredom. To give themselves something to do. And with the spiritual air of the magical plants, more spiritual qi might get attracted over. In the long run, it would also become a form of wealth for their descendants. So the reason why those from 3 holy lands advanced so quickly in their practice was because of this. Secondly, roses only bloom in warm summer. A heaven-defying situation like this, from what I know, is not achievable by human abilities. If someone was able to do it, haha, everyone, even if it were that 9 Nether first young master from 1,000,000 years ago, he might not even be able to do this either. If we are to determine that it is 9 Nether 14th young master based on this, we may be thinking too highly of him. He may not be capable of this. The elder continued to with a heavier tone. Human abilities may not be enough to achieve this. But if you have enough physical materials, it's not entirely impossible. Instantly, all the other people in the room had an expression of sudden realization. Everyone here has vast and wide knowledge. I'm sure you will catch what I mean quickly. Let's use some rare, but not completely impossible to find, objects as examples. Such as the jade cord jewel, heaven earth spirit vein, or jade vein hot spring, which stays warm for thousands of years. One could just bury a treasure of this type into the ground to create a scenery that defied the seasons. So this evidence is not enough to prove that 9 Nether 14th young master is present. With regards to the 2 mutes that speak with their bellies, the restructuring and reforming of abilities, such skills have never surfaced in the continent before. I do agree that it is extremely weird and requires more consideration. But thinking of it from another way, it is this suspicious scene that gives me the confidence to guess that the person inside is definitely not the 9 Nether 14th young master. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 750. The Saint's Operation. The white-robed elder smiled and continued in a confident manner. It is known that the 9 Nether 14th young master and the 9 Nether 1st young master came from the same place. Hence, we can assume that what the 9 Nether 1st young master is not able to do, 9 Nether 14th young master also cannot do. And for the millions years of history in Xian continent, the martial arts that have been passed down is always the 9 Nether 1st young master's skills. So though the mutes being able to talk is odd, strange and shocking even, but definitely not a skill from the bloodline of the 9 Nethers. These words made great sense. Everyone nodded in agreement and felt the worry in their hearts lighten a little. And that girl's body who was being controlled. I would discern it to be some sort of high-leveled skill, but it might not be a Xian skill. After all, there are still many things in this world that we cannot understand. Let's talk about the restriction skills of all the various families. We may have the cultivation level of a saint, but as we all know, we may not necessarily know of every single one that exists. They are secret skills that are only imparted within the family, and outsiders are incapable of breaking them. This isn't something uncommon. Haha. And lastly, the knife skills of that little girl. Just as the matter with the mutes talking, it follows the same logic. I would speculate that there is an expert in the Jun residence. Without a doubt. But it definitely is not the 9 Nether 14th young master. Although this person's prowess is relatively significant, but it still cannot be compared or likened to the 9 Nether 14th young masters. With a decisive tone, this white-robed elder denied Qi Tianfeng's deduction. And one more important thing. A middle-aged man donned in purple said. As legends have it, wherever the 9 Nether 14th young master appears, a type of unfathomable eerie aura follows. And as long as this bizarre aura appears, everything in that area is incapable of growing. This is also why the seniors who were injured at the hands of the 9 Nether 14th young master still are unable to recover till date. So, the courtyard filled with all sorts of greenery is the biggest reason as to why the 9 Nether 14th young master is not inside. And you guys did not feel that sort of eeriness, right? Qi Tianfeng nodded. But he was not very pleased with the deductions of these two people. Since you can create with your skills, couldn't your aura be altered? This wouldn't be difficult for a true master at the peak. Furthermore, other than a lunatic like the 9 Nether 14th young master, where else could you find a second madman like this? If you deny my words like this, you're probably just subconsciously hoping that you are not facing the 9 Nether 14th young master. You think I want to face him? Which normal person, even a saint king, would be willing to face an insane person like him? But if your subconscious timidity affects the correct judgment, that it is a more fatal matter. Both of you do make perfect sense in your speculations, but this matter still needs to be reconsidered. It is not that I am being stubborn and am not open to other ideas, but I still firmly believe that the person inside is the 9 Nether 14th young master. And we must not be too careless. Caution is the parent of safety. When we entered the courtyard, we indeed did not feel any eerie aura, but we did experience a cold feeling that went into our hearts. This was a real feeling we had felt. Qi Tianfeng looked over to his two sworn brothers. Sa Qinglu and Cui Chang he nodded in sync, proving that he wasn't lying. Ha! Brother Qi. Perhaps it was just a matter of you lacking confidence. How could that be a basis to determine whether it's the 9 Nether 14th young master? The middle-aged man in purple robe laughed, his words laced with sarcasm. Miao Wu Ji. What do you mean by that? If you are really confident, why do you keep denying that we are facing the 9 Nether 14th young master? Qi Tianfeng said angrily. At least I have the confidence to face this cruel scenario. And do you have the right to say that I'm lacking confidence? Miao Wuji laughed. Whether one is confident or not is not something that can be clarified with the volume of one's voice. Brother Qi, do simmer down. There will definitely be evidence. Then I shall wait and see. Qi Tianfeng sucked in a deep breath of air. Shooting daggers at Miao Wuji, he sat down angrily. They had already been a thorn in each other's eye for 400 years. And it still continued today. The white-robed saint frowned and said, "Everyone, please don't fight. There is still benefit from the trip by Brother Qi and the rest. At least we can affirm that whether that person in the Jun residence is the 9 Nether 14th young master or not, he is definitely a shocking character of this world. This is an undoubtable fact. We must not take our enemy too lightly. Furthermore, we definitely must not recklessly act within Tianxiang City." He laughed, but his face was still solemn. All of us are aware that if we are to unleash our powers, Tianxiang City will be completely destroyed within seconds in this battle. And this place is filled with such a huge population. Furthermore, the misty illusory manner will naturally intervene. The best method is to lure this person out, then encircle and annihilate. That's right. Brother Chen, do you have any plans? Miao Wuji nodded his head and asked. This old saint was called Chen Chong, and although his name wasn't extremely tacky, he was the only second-level saint amongst all who were present. And he was meticulous in his considerations and had many stratagems. So naturally, he became the leader of this alliance. We could kidnap someone important from the Jun residence, which is not difficult to do. Though this method is a little despicable, but it is the most simple. Chen Chong said slowly, crinkling his eyes. This plan is perhaps not appropriate. No one would have thought that the person who had voiced this was the person they all thought had no rights to be involved in this conference. Li Yuran. All eyes were on him the moment he opened his mouth. A group of saints are discussing. It's already a blessing accumulated from a few lives for an ant-like, insignificant little jade Xian cultivator like you to be present. Instead of staying quiet, you need to abruptly say, "This plan is perhaps not appropriate." It's a little too comical. And if put in a harsher way, too impudent. Do you care to explain why is this inappropriate? Chen Chong smiled and asked gently. Li Yuran also didn't know why he made this objection. Upon hearing that suggestion, he made that objection without taking time to think, as if it were a matter of course. Even Li Yuran was a little surprised after the words had left his mouth. Almost as if, subconsciously, he did not wish for the Jun family to perish. Did not hope for Jun Moxie to die. Actually, Li Yuran's mind was really strange currently. So strange to the point that even he couldn't understand what he was thinking. Jun Moxie. Even if you are defeated, you need to be defeated in the strategies I made. Although your capabilities have already surpassed me, if you are defeated in my schemes, then it still counts as my victory. This was the rival mentality they had as each other's opponents. As if Li Yuran had already admitted, beneath this sky, only you are worthy of being my opponent. And one more thing, Jun Moxie and Li Yuran were similar in age. But Jun Moxie had already become an existence that many people in this world held in high regards. This was like a role model that Li Yuran was chasing after. Catch up. Surpass him. Then stomp him to death. If I temporarily cannot catch up, I mustn't allow anyone else to destroy him. Instead, I must protect him at all costs. This was very strange kind of mentality, to the point that in Li Yuran's heart, there was a vague mentality of worshipping Jun Moxie. After all, Li Yuran had never obeyed anyone. Even if they were people of the same generation, unless they were of a different standing, they could not even be mentioned alongside him. So although Li Yuran pretended to be a modest gentleman, deep in his bones, he looked down on everything. But this Jun Moxie had popped out of nowhere and was much higher than himself. So Li Yuran sort of worshipped him instead. Plus, since the last chat Li Yuran had with Jun Moxie, he could vaguely tell that Jun Moxie did not hold much animosity towards himself. Which may be of great aid. What Li Yuran, pursue has never been a venerable or saint-level cultivation. Those are too far of reach for me. What I want is worldly. What I want is possessions. That's all. But to gain the aid of Jun Moxie, he needed to disperse before he would be able to exchange for it. How Jun Moxie was as a person, Li Yuran was very clear. Jun Moxie definitely wouldn't let anyone reap benefits without sowing harms, even if we are to become enemies in the future. You'd still owe me quite a bit of friendship. This was the root reason why Li Yuran had raised his objection. Facing Chen Chong, Li Yuran pondered for a while before speaking. It is not that I wish to be impudent, but there is truly a reason. Do listen to my explanation. First of all, our goal. I'd like to ask all the elders present, what is the goal of this operation? Is it to kill that mystery person or to subdue him? After all, this person is capable of creating medicine that defies the heavens. This is too crucial to the future of the three holy lands. I believe that it is only when left without a choice that we should decide to kill the person. A decision like this is definitely a poor decision. This matter has been entrusted to me by the city lord, which is also the reason why I rashly objected. Everyone was taken aback. This man wasn't entirely wrong. And one more thing, this person's capability. I dare to ask every single senior present here if anyone is confident enough to kill or capture this person, or even just force him to retreat. All 9 saints frowned at the same time. This was something none of them were confident about. If they could even win by joining forces was still something that remained to be seen. Li Yuran, obviously intelligent, had already predicted this. Without changing his expression, he continued. Also, let's put ourselves in someone else's shoe. If all of you seniors were that someone, and someone had abducted someone you held dear and threatened you with it, how would you react? Perhaps it may not last as a lifelong feud, or become impossible for both of you to live under the same sky. But I'm afraid that there may not be any opportunities for any form of collaboration in this lifetime. Everyone nodded. And there is one more reason, Jun Tian's personality. If we want to kidnap someone, only Jun Tian is capable of putting up a fight. But this old man has an extremely irascible personality. And he wouldn't allow himself to be insulted. If he were to die due to this, then 3 holy lands will definitely become the target of this expert's vengeance and revenge. After all, his disciple had left the house to him. But in a couple of days, the most important person died just like that. Had it been you seniors, what would you do? Even if the 3 holy lands didn't mind, it is still not a good thing. At the very least, we must take complete advantage of him before cutting off ties. What would we do? Of course, go berserk. Seek revenge. Take out our anger. All the saints nodded slowly. How could they not mind? A master of such capabilities, even if 3 holy lands were to face off with him, they would still be in trouble. If that weren't the case, why would 9 saints all gather here? So I think that the best method to handle this expert is to fight fair and openly. Li Yuran continued. First, it will show that we are open and above board. Second, it is more suitable of our statuses at least. It wouldn't attract too much disgust. Third, I dare guess that when you have attained such a level of cultivation, you may feel a little lonely. Upon meeting an expert that is almost at the same level as yourself. I believe you'd be happy. This does make sense. Chen Chong looked at Li Yuran and said. That's right. It is just as you said. Senior has flattered me. Li Yuran replied humbly. Li Yuran was truly good with his words. After his speech, all the saints nodded their heads in agreement. It is better to fight in the open, but the problem is, how do we get him to do so? After all, we do have the upper hand of number of people. Miao Wuji scratched his head. After he had asked this question, they all realized that they had gone back to the beginning. After half a day of discussion, nothing was solved. Letter of challenge. Lead the way or startle them. Chen Chong gritted his teeth and said. We shall act based on these three methods for now. We definitely need to lure him out. Only one person is to go each time, and do not stay for longer than 10 breaths. If there is no success, immediately return. Everyone nodded. 10 breaths was an essential preparation time to take control over saints like them. Even a saint king couldn't control a saint as he wished. 10 breaths was the most basic period of time that was needed to communicate with the heaven-earth spiritual chi and convert it into an energy that could be used to control saints. As long as a saint was not controlled in his actions, then no one could stop him as long as he wished to leave. Even if it were the 9 Nether 14th young master, there was this safety guarantee. Everyone nodded and this matter was temporarily decided. Thus, in the following few days, people visited the Jun residence at night in waves, continuous and never-ending. Always leaving quickly, even if they stayed, it was for the duration of a couple of pants of ordinary people. Provoking with their aura, encompassing with their spiritual ability, or disturbing and alarming them with strange sounds. Even a gold-ironed letter of challenge was very formally delivered into the Jun residence. When faced with all this, the Jun family was like a prideful princess, facing the whistles of gangsters and scoundrels. They remained motionless. They didn't even bother to take a look. There was no choice. Even if they wished to take action, they couldn't. Even with the entire family's forces combined, it wasn't enough to compare to the force of a single saint blowing out in one breath. What actions could they take? So everything was put on hold for discussion later, and time continued to pass slowly by. On the other side, in the snowy mountains, Jun Moxie was experiencing one of the most bizarre encounters he had ever experienced before. This story will be continued to chapter 751. For those of you who are not subscribed yet, please subscribe. The interesting and best stories will be updated. See you again in the next episode.